In this episode, we're going to deal with a difficult charge that Ryan has been dealt with. He's been charged with many things, and I'll deal with some of them, although I think they're fairly ridiculous, including the most recent one, which is that he's a closet racist, which I think is pretty silly, and that's by John Boyega and others. But I do think there has been an issue of creativity in how original his work is, and people have pointed to The Last Jedi in various aspects that have been borrowed or stolen from other filmmakers and other films. And to some extent, this isn't much of a strong charge because Ryan admits to it. Again, I don't have much good things to say about Mahler's TFA video, but he has this little small clip of audio commentary where Ryan acknowledges taking things from, for instance, Back to the Future Part 2. So he readily acknowledges he does borrow from others. But when I was a Mahler fan, and people may not believe me, but I was, people did a lot of good research and they noted some interesting things and parallels. Again, some of these pan out, some of these don't. But here I'm going to deal with, I think, one of the strongest cases, which is the ending of The Last Jedi with Kylo and Luke, where Luke tricks Kylo. Well, some people have done some investigating and found that this is very close to John Carpenter Escape from LA. Now, in that ending, Snake uses a hologram to basically trick the bad guys. And in The Last Jedi, Luke uses not a hologram, but he uses a projection through force powers to trick Kylo. And it's not exact. It's not a word for word. It's not verbatim, but definitely thematically and visually, there's a huge overlap. So how do we deal with this? Well, I guess I would cut it up in three ways. We do have examples of people taking or borrowing or stealing. So to give the most difficult one or difficult level, I would say, when Disney steals from The Lion King, right? Because The Lion King is based on Kimba, which is a Japanese cartoon. That's complete theft. There's really nothing else going on. That's just complete theft. There's no real transformation. It's just thieving, it's just stealing, and that's it. But if we're going to be honest, I think George Lucas probably falls into that with Dune. If you look at Dune carefully, almost everything in Star Wars is originally in Dune, so that's also complete theft. Though I think Lucas is a little differently because he did try to compensate Kurosawa and others, whereas Disney hasn't really compensated the Japanese creators of Kimba at all. Then there's the second level, which is Tarantino, right, who endlessly borrows and quotes, sometimes word for word. He just steals entire scenes, but he often tries to justify it saying, well, it's an artistic thing. I don't think that always holds up, but that's, I think, still a different standard. It is stealing, but it is a difficult mixture case of inspiration and borrowing. And even great writers do it, right? Shakespeare, George R. Martin. I mean, there are aspects of George R. Martin's work that he really doesn't do very much. He just completely copies from something else, passes it off as his own, and collects the money. So there are difficult cases where it's a little in between stealing and inspiration. But I think Ryan falls into the third category, somebody like Ong Lee or Kubrick or Hitchcock, where yes, it's a lot of borrowing and it's almost essentially a theft, but there is some transformation, and it is not just stealing. There is some innovation involved. Even when it's almost an exact copy of the other thing, there is a lot of little things that are done to make it somewhat different from the original. Again, it's a hard category, and again, I'm open to being challenged. I do think some would argue that Ryan is sort of in between the Tarantino standard and the Kubrick standard or Hitchcock standard. And I'm not saying in terms of actual skill level. I don't think Ryan is at the level of Hitchcock. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying in terms of this particular issue, in terms of borrowing or being inspired by others. I do think it's more of a Hitchcock thing than a Disney thing. I don't think it's just outright theft. I don't think it's even at the level of Lucas. He just took something, borrowed it completely, and didn't give any acknowledgement. I do think he gives readily acknowledgement of other people and other people perform. So it's more of an homage. But I can definitely say that it's definitely going a little bit beyond just borrowing. It is traipsing into this difficult territory of stealing from other people. But I do think it's more of in the Kubrick territory. But there are going to be other cases where I do think Ryan does go too far. But this is not, I think, one of them. But it is the strongest case of very visually, clearly just borrowing from another source. And he's, as far as I know, never explicitly acknowledged it, but I do think it's really difficult to deny that, yeah, he is definitely taking a lot from John Carpenter. So for me, that does push down the score a little bit in terms of the final ending, which otherwise I do think is near perfect. But again, now that we know it's very derivative, I do think we should take some points off. But that's just my opinion. All right, this has been assessing the difficult issue of theft in The Last Jedi, Star Wars Analyzed. If you like the content, please hit the like button and/or subscribe. Thank you for listening. Please drop a like or a comment below. Please also subscribe to Gurm Analyzed if you can. I'm going to start dealing with issues of where George is borrowing a lot, especially from Marvel and DC. All right. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.